So other things that I can do, not necessarily the repertoire that I was playing, but certainly a way to kind of work on just ongoing like skills development as a musician. I'm not a very good sight reader, so I've actually spent quite a bit of time playing around with all sorts of fun things, sight reading. So that's been quite good. I mentioned I've done some videos on this Kenya Hansen's advanced sight reading curriculum that I've been working through. So I actually found like one or two of the things and the exercises that he had there were things that I could actually try on this. Certainly things about not looking at your hands, and also things like reading, recognizing intervals. So there's one example I'm going to give you now, which I find this staggeringly difficult to do. It's basically about, it's trying to teach you to use distances between notes as ways to read without necessarily having to name the notes in your head, to try and speed up that process of being able to see something and and then play it at the keyboard. So I'll put a image of this in the video or below, but basically what this is, so he uses what he calls the 11 note stave, or the 11 bar or line stave, which is just makes it incredibly confusing. You can't figure out what any note is, so you have to use sort of relative positioning. So how this goes, I mean, it starts off relatively simply. So he says to start on the tonic, play it in F. So I'll start on F. And then what we have to do is, it's a step contrary motion, and then back, thirds in the left hand, second, fourth. I think that's an octave. Yeah. That's one of the easier ones. So I've been trying to work through those, and they're not that straightforward, but lots of other sight reading. And I've also done a little bit of stuff like just trying to transpose things into different keys. Also quite a useful thing to do. Once again, not something that I would usually do, although this, I guess, is an opportunity to, the way to make the most of it is to do things that I never really have time to do. So the last thing I want to talk about is come back to the theme of being able to sort of practice on something like this and lay foundations for learning a piece. It's called the step ladder approach. I think that's what Graham Fitch calls it, and it's basically a way of learning a fugue in instead of learning it hand by hand, or separately or together, whatever, you learn it voice by voice, and then you play different combinations of voices together. And it's surprisingly difficult to do. I mean, it's almost easier just to play them all together than to just have to play two of them, one of them. Well, what you have to do though is you've got to, when you may just do a playthrough to work out the fingerings, but then the individual voices have to be played with the fingers that you'd use when you put them together. That is really, really tricky. And I've tried this once or twice before and really struggled with it, and not stuck with it for learning fugue. So I thought, well, why not see if I could give this different approach a try with it's number 21 from book 1 in B flat major. So it goes like this. Now the soprano voice is pretty easy to a point, but there's one or two places where there's just a few slight differences. So we go. Now I'm going to take over, redistribute the alto to the right hand. So I've got to get onto 5 there. I would usually just stand, if I could just stay there. But no, so I'd go 5, so I can get 4. And then going on, so I'd, and that I also have to bear in mind the fingerings, because I'm going to do. Now this will actually make more sense when I start showing the other voices and combining them. So then the alto voice is pretty simple to know which hand it starts with, because the right hand is busy at this point. So it comes in with the theme. And then this I'm going to substitute. I've got to go to 5 there because I've got to do. So you get the idea there. The middle one is usually the most difficult because it'll have the most redistributions across both hands. The bass is pretty straightforward. Okay, that's a lot easier. And it's really just a case of leaving out a few notes, particularly in the last line of what I played. Now, let's start playing with combinations of voices. So the first one let's do is I'll just go from when the subject comes into the alto. Let's put the soprano and alto together. And then, sorry. Then what happens there is then the left hand has to come back again, but you can kind of see that that one is actually quite straightforward because it's mostly done in the right hand. Then let's try the alto on the bass, from when the bass comes in. So we've got... Okay, so there's that one there. That's that the last bit's a bit difficult to do with no bounce, but I'll rebound on the keys. And then one, let me try this now. This is probably going to be quite tricky, is soprano and bass, so leaving out everything in the alto voice. So we'll go from where the bass comes in. Okay, so it's a little bit messy there. I'll probably have to work on that one a bit more. I mean, I find it surprisingly difficult, especially doing it. I can just about do it normally, and doing it like while filming is actually quite daunting. So I suspect while this wouldn't be sufficient for learning the whole piece and doing a finessed performance, preparing for a finessed performance, it's certainly some good groundwork. And I think that when I do actually play this on a piano, it's going to be a heck of a lot easier. And I'm not going to be that far off being able to play it all together. And when I do have it together, I should have a much more detailed, in-depth understanding of the voicing and the counterpoint. So these were just a few tips and ideas. So this is my way of sort of staying sane and entertained. I hope to be able to play on my piano again at some point. So this is just a temporary measure for just trying to make the most of things. But I think I actually was quite surprised as to how much I could do just without having access to a acoustic piano with weighted keys. So I hope you enjoyed that. And if you are ever on the road and in the terrible position of not having a piano, I hope you found these tips a little bit helpful.